And let me begin with the passing of Pat Summerall, which we will get to in some way with a guest today. We're working on a couple of different things. You know, everyone's running to all the same guys to talk to them, so it's hard for them to do 4 million interviews apiece, especially the guys who are very close to him, okay? So I'll give it to you from really my standpoint more than anything else, because I'm not going to tell you Pat and I were friends, because we weren't, okay? We had a great difference in age, but I did know Pat for almost 35 years. So I did know him, and when I got to CBS, Pat was a very big star. I mean, he was the man when I got to CBS. You know, Brent was the man doing his stuff, and then what he didn't do, Pat did. Okay, Pat did golf. Pat was the lead guy on NFL, obviously at that time with Tom Brookshire, who was his best friend. And he, you know, as people don't remember, he was very upset when they split them up. Very upset. But that created really the iconic matchup of Summerall and Madden. That was created out of something Pat didn't want. But it turned out to be something that became very, not because he had anything against John, of course, but because he and Brookie were best friends. And they were, to, you know, put it bluntly, they were guys who liked to go out. I mean, everyone knows that about Pat. Pat, you know, was a guy who liked nightlife and liked to have a drink, liked to have more than a drink. So we know that. We know that has been part of his story. But that's not anywhere near the story. And it's way down the line today. Because, you know, what Pat did was something that was really, something that really can't be done today on the same level. First of all, sportscasting was in its infancy. So a guy who was in New York and was an athlete like Pat had opportunities, as did Frank Gifford. And Frank Gifford and Pat really seized these opportunities better than anybody else. And it gave them a chance to get into what was a fledgling business. And they obviously both had a proclivity for it, but let's deal with Pat today since he's gone. And Pat, obviously, that became, after his career, which his hallmark was as a kicker, as you know, and made some, you know, huge kicks. He became a guy in New York who had opportunities, and he really ran with those opportunities to where he became a play-by-play guy and then became a top-level play-by-play guy and branched out and was able to do the Masters and was able to do golf and was able to do tennis and was able to do a million other things as a lead play-by-play guy. And to be able to take the time to hone his craft. And as everyone knows, Pat, who was a guy who had a very good voice, became really what people call now, and rightly so, the voice of football, and was very, very succinct in his style. Pat said very little and really not only gave his analysts the chance to grow and to really be the star, but he just had a very, very economical way of doing games and doing events. He said a lot with very few words, which is something that is very much been lost through the years. There are very few people who do that now, if any, who do it with as few words as they possibly can. They will always do it with more rather than less. There's very few who do it with less, and I think that's what made Pat different. Also, Pat had that, you know, he was rugged, he was, you know, manly, he had the voice, and he obviously had an opportunity to do many of the great sporting events. And what everyone has said about Pat is true. Now, Pat had no reason to be nice to me. Plus, you know, at the time there was a rivalry between the game guys and the studio guys, and I was kind of really working with the studio guys, and I'd only crossed the path to those guys very rarely. But whenever I did, Pat and Brookshire at the time, well, Madden later, but Pat especially was very good to me, always was. I always appreciate that, and he didn't have to be. But he was good to everybody. That's the kind of guy he was. He was a terrific, terrific guy. Everyone liked him. Nobody didn't like Pat. That's, you know, I don't think you would find anybody anywhere didn't like Pat Summerall. That's the thing. I don't think you'll find anybody say a bad word about him. He's one of those guys who everyone likes. You know, a rare guy who just seems to get along with everybody. And he was able to do that. Now, I'm sure at times he had his blow-ups and he had his thing, but they were very few and far between. If Pat had obviously an issue, it was that, he liked to drink. And he drank to excess. And it caused him some serious problems down the line. There, he went to Betty Ford, influenced his very close friend Mickey Mantle to go to Betty Ford, which obviously fans know. There was an intervention that sent Pat there. Mickey talked to Pat about it. Pat didn't push Mickey in, but he talked to him about it, and that led Mickey to get help after Pat had gotten help. And Pat obviously lived a long time after he had gotten help and had found a second life. Yes, he did get a controversial liver transplant. Pat had been very successful and made a lot of money. I think people realize. Outside of sportscasting, he had done well. He had some financial friends who I guess, helped him, gave him some, a chance to get into some good stuff. So good for him. He was successful. But he did get that, and that helped him live as long as he lived because he had been very sick at other times many, many years ago. Stomach issues and different issues and liver issues and other things. But he wound up lasting, and that was good for everybody, to the age 82, which that was an age a lot of people wouldn't have given him a long time ago. So he wound up getting a very long, very rich life.